All right. Well, welcome back to Fiegel Files, episode 17. I am with the lovely Traci Ahart, the Hell on Heels mediator, her mediation practice with Hell on Heels. Um, in this episode, we're driving into the power of mediation, how resolving family disputes outside the courtroom can lead to faster, more practical, and less emotionally draining outcomes. We're going to talk about what mediation is, how it really works, and why it can be a game changer in high conflict cases. Whether navigating a family law matter or just curious about alternative dispute resolution, this conversation offers real insight into a path forward. Let's get started. Joining us is Traci Ahart with Helen Heels Mediation, an experienced family law mediator who helps families find common ground and work towards solutions that actually make sense for their lives and not just the law. She's best known for her love of stilettos and co-founder of the women lawyers group Hell on Heels. Traci's also a mom, a cancer survivor, and a mental health advocate. She's dedicated to helping families resolve conflicts outside of traditional litigation with extensive experience in mediation dispute resolution. She focuses on guiding parties towards practical collaborative solutions that prioritize long-term stability and mutual understanding. Her approach emphasizes communication, compromise, and creative problem solving to reach agreements that work for everyone involved. Welcome, Traci.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. I've been a friend of yours for almost half a decade. I've only been able to mediate with you once. Just in Bear County, for some reason, your name doesn't ring. So when I put you as the potential mediators, I don't get, but I loved my one experience with you. I'll say that.
Well, I feel the same, and you Bear County folks, I've had that same conversation with the handful of folks I work with. I actually went to St. Mary's, and so I am
Oh,
very familiar with kind of what I call the clique. Love them, get it.
yeah,
Everybody's got their favorite mediators, and quite frankly, not every mediator is right for every case. I think you got
agreed.
to find a fit.
Yeah. So let I my audience, whatever size it is somewhat diverse. Help people. What is mediation? And we're going to just do a family law context today. That's your bread and butter. A lot of what I do. What is mediation and practically like as far as how it's ordered through the court? What are your authority as a mediator? Just can you give a general outline of what mediation is, first of all, and what it's not?
Absolutely. Mediation is an alternative dispute resolution process whereby a mediator serves as a neutral and I help parties come to an agreement. Not a judge, I don't make decisions. It is a confidential process. I do not give legal advice in that process. I can explain a legal concept, but I can't say you should do A or B. Most of the time, parties are going to have their own attorneys for that. And when the process is complete, we will have what's called a mediated settlement agreement. That is a binding document that outlines the terms of the parties' agreement, and it will then be drafted into an order by one of the attorneys on board of the case.
So, a couple like things that's not first, if you agree it's binding, but do you as a mediator have any authority or power at all?
Zero.
Yeah.
Zero. Everyone
Mhm.
always has the opportunity to roll the dice, go down to that courthouse, and let somebody else make the decision for them.
Like there you go. And then
People do think I'm the judge a lot. I get a lot of that. Like people have a misconception coming in. They think it's makes more formal than it
yeah,
actually is. And they
yes.
think somehow I will see them all the time, like pleading their case to me. And I'm like, I hear you loud and clear. What I'm telling you is these are the parameters where I can get an agreement. I don't get
Yeah,
to make that decision. You get to make that decision.
yeah. Why, I'm a big advocate. I think it's required in almost every county before
Mhm.
you have a final trial. There, it's not, but you'll get it the second you ask for it.
Right.
Why is it more cost effective to mediate than just go straight to litigation?
Well, I will give you an example. A mediator is going to cost anywhere between $400 to $1,000 per party for a half day mediation, depending on your jurisdiction. You've got your mediation fee and you've got your attorney time. Let's say an attorney spends an hour or two prepping for mediation, they spend 4, 5, 6 hours in mediation. In my experience, going to trial back in the days when I did that and listening to other attorneys now speak, you're looking at least about an average of one full day or 8 hours of trial prep for every day that you're in trial. So not only is there that financial benefit, I always say there's a financial cost, there is an emotional cost that you save by not throwing dirt at each other in a courtroom and then living with it for the next 10, 15 years that you're raising children together. There's also a legal cost because the courts are very constrained by the family code and what the family code says and what they can and can't order. We can get way more creative and address much more concerns that are a little off the beaten path in mediation than you ever can in the courtroom. And so
I
I think those three areas at the end of the day absolutely make it most cost effective.
I agree with all. I want to go into detail with all. So first, the practical financial costs. One of the things I tell my clients is, I mean, yes, mediation's in, abstractly expensive. $1,000 for the mediator, 350 an hour for me times whatever. Maybe we work something out, but it's required. One, you're gonna have to go probably.
Right.
Two, the cost you there. But what I tell people too is mediation is usually the best insight for trial prep I will ever get. If it doesn't
Absolutely.
settle, I will never. Now, there's a rule of confidentiality, so I kind of want to break this for people, but that I can't use proposals against someone later. I can't use comments that were said. I can't use ideas. That's not what I mean. But if you're in a real mediation for 3, 6 hours, you will learn the priorities, the weaknesses, the strengths of the other party, where they really want to be, who they really are at a human level. And I don't think anything has ever prepared me more for trial. I tell people I could probably go to trial the following day after a mediation most of the
Absolutely.
time. So all that trial prep you're talking about, I get a lot of that in mediation. I'm learning what they really want, what they're really seeking. So I think people need to understand that too. Um, Help me with, and I know some of these answers. I do this for a living, but when you say creative solutions, can you give some examples of whether it's divorce, asset separation, or children, what you can do in mediation that you can't do in a courtroom, that a judge
Let
can't
me
do in a courtroom?
let me start with well, the first thing that comes to mind on the asset division part of it is so often people sign on to a mortgage together and then they
Yep.
get divorced and all of a sudden they don't want to be on a mortgage with somebody else.
Hmm.
Fortunately, the courts cannot order a third party lien holder like a mortgage company to refinance.
Right.
So I structure all kinds of settlement situations where we have a requirement of here's the judgment amount we're going to buy out. Here is the date by which we're going to refinance and or sell. I can get a lot more in the weeds with that and address everybody's concerns to the extent possible so that we're not just saying, okay, the judge can award to party A, party B, or sell the house, right?
Mhm.
Because those aren't always the ideal solutions, especially if you have little ones, right? A
Well,
lot of people want
make
to keep kids in school districts, things like that.
I was gonna say, make this more human. I mean, it's I've represented men and women. I've represented
Mhm.
traditional households, not traditional households. But imagine a traditional household. You have a breadwinner making decent money, and a woman, maybe 20 years married that doesn't have right now job skills. Just because she might get X in child support, X and maybe some spousal, she can't afford a house going forward. So
Correct.
there's a very human. But maybe this guy can't afford, you know, full guideline support and alimony and paying. The judge kind of is restricted. Okay, here's my parameters on maintenance. Here's my parameters on support. Ma'am, out of the house in 3 months, or you can refi if you can afford it, which you can't. We can, in mediation, say, actually, maybe child support doesn't start for this amount of time, or we can roll those things together and
Correct.
mesh them that in a very human way. Like, hey, man, these are your kids living in this house, or ma'am, these are your kids living in this house, or ma'am, this guy's got to have some financial liquidity to be able to maybe run his business. Courts are very you got to sell, got to refi. They do what they
Right.
can, but you can mix these areas in mediation. You can't do that in the courtroom, in my experience, anyway.
Absolutely. And I
Yeah.
ask every party, particularly if I've got a breadwinner who may be considering taking a job somewhere else, or are you going to be in the area? Are you not? With my women who have been at home for 20 years, maybe held a part-time gig, something like that. We always look at what does the next chapter look like in your mind? Tell me where you're leaning so that we can structure things like maybe it's better for her to have a paid off vehicle, right? And no debt moving forward, and or if the mortgage is 1,200 a month in this most of the jurisdictions, even out in West Texas where I mediate, she's not going to find anything cheaper than that.
Nope.
So
Yeah.
we really do look at what does this next chapter look like for you to build from here. And
Yeah.
so it's a little bit working backwards, but I think it focuses on the human element and helps myself and the attorneys to game plan for these parties.
What I love about when I mediated with you and the mediators I choose is it's a very human process for the clients, and court can tend to be dehumanizing. And that's not me talking at judges. They just simply have a job to do. It's very
Right.
formal. Rules apply. I mean, talk about cost litigation. I can just show you a document mediation. There's all kinds of objections, authenticity, subpoenas, proving up document, all that stuff in court that can limit and mess up their in the mediation. It's just there. We know what the information is. We can cut through some of that. I
Right.
don't want to say bullshit because the rules are there for a reason. But what I love about yours and then some other colleagues that I work with is I feel like my clients have a very real opportunity to be very authentic and human about what's going on.
Absolutely.
Um, what one of the ladies I use, her name is Frances Dunham, one of your competitors, I guess.
Nah,
Um, you
there's plenty of mediation work
yeah,
for everybody. Trust
you're
me.
right, fair. And I mean, her and you both, like, what I tell my clients is like, talk to them, tell them what's going on, and there's going to be anywhere from 10 minutes to 60 minutes to learn what happened. Why are you getting divorced? Where are you at? How are you handling it? And those things matter because that's how we plan for the future we're talking about.
Right.
And if all we talk about is, all right, well, we got to refi the house, and how are we doing the quadro to get the retirement separated, and what's child support figure? You got a mom and a dad and a husband and wife who just are going through one of those hellish experiences. Maybe someone was unfaithful, and maybe that person was feeling a certain way about the marriage, and maybe religion changed, or kids got in the way. You want to let them give their whole story, I think, in mediation.
Right.
And the best mediators I have are relating to these parties, and they can tell them, I'm sorry about what you're going through, and humanize when the law doesn't necessarily meet their needs,
Right.
and
And
because it's
I've
not
told,
going to.
yeah, and I tell people that, um, the human element, and sometimes people just need to be heard. They don't
Yeah.
necessarily have to be heard by a judge, but they have to be heard by somebody. And I
Hmm.
always jokingly say that the numerous mistakes I've made in my own life, I've been through two divorces myself. I spent 15 years as a single parent. All of those life experiences have, I think, made me a better mediator in that I can relate to what some of these people are saying. It doesn't always change the message I have to deliver to them, but I can do it with empathy. I can't wave my wand and change the law for you.
Yeah.
But what I can do is tell you, I get it, I've been there, and I can also tell you that there is a light at the end of this tunnel, and it is not a train, even though it may feel like it. And so, kind of by my own experiences, and now my son is now, he'll be 27 next month. So he was 5 when we divorced. So I've been there, done that, got the t-shirts.
Yeah.
And I think that helps a lot when people are just so frustrated with the situation and frustrated with the process and frustrated with the system to just hear somebody say, I hear you. And
Yeah.
I really try hard to do that, even if it's a stressful mediation. And at the end, I always try to wrap up and be like, look, you've got this, you're going to do great. Make them feel like somebody took the time to listen to them.
Yeah. Well, and it helps because I think you actually do. I mean, this isn't just
Yeah.
a game. You actually are hearing them and listening.
Right.
And I think the best ones do. And at the end of family law is weird to me because it- it's not zero sum. How do I say this? When I'm in a
Right.
contract dispute, like I'm doing one now, I mean, I have a good relationship with the other attorney. I don't care if these parties get along. There's no long-term relationship. But in family law, you're dealing with kids for a very long time with each other, basically forever. And these parties were in love not that long ago.
Right.
And you still have some compassion, care back and forth. Your relationship with them matters. So it's a different animal. And I think it's hard to explain that to people. It's not just, yes, when I advertise strongest lawyer in Texas, I'm a bulldog. That's on purpose. People want to
Right.
hire the asshole attorney. That's fine. But I'm not really doing you a favor if I find every sticking point, stick it, and win every little checkbox because you're
Right.
just creating a miserable situation with that person going forward. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. So when you get to a mediation and you can have human conversations, whether I've got like the breadwinner on my side and he gives a little more, like, dude, this is mother your kids. Like, I don't care what the law says. Why don't your kids are going to grow up? You've got to show an example. Or it's a different situation where that person doesn't have elements and you're looking at someone a little more set up. That child support's going to break him. He can't. And I don't mean this is every case. This isn't, there are
Sure.
cases where it's
One's
appropriate.
different for sure.
Right. But you can have those far more in-depth conversations about the long-term impact. Judges are constrained. So yeah.
It's always interesting. It tends to be when I've got the male breadwinner who is, just he's like, I paid and paid, and why should I keep paying? And I said, look, you're talking to somebody who paid spousal support to two husbands. And neither of them qualified, right? It was
Yeah.
just sometimes you do it because it's the right thing to do. Sometimes you do it because your kiddo's there. Sometimes you do it because it's easier to throw a little extra money at a problem than to create the stress or the additional emotional stress with it. And so once I'm able to share that when I've got somebody digging in, it's almost like a light bulb goes off and they do a one. They're just so shocked, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, if you've got a man in a traditional role, it surprises him that there are women who have been in his role
Yeah.
before. So
I agree.
again, relating. I try to find something in every case.
Yeah. I I don't know what my experience. I'm only in year 14, which is that those years are growing as time goes on.
Right?
But I don't have too many just um, full on villains. Most people are pretty human. Like, I mean, there are people who do bad things, and this isn't me being like, excusing domestic violence or something silly like that. But most of the time, they really are human beings, and they do have a perspective. And if you can hear them, I know we're beating the dead horse a little, but I think people want to hear like that's where mediation can really, I think, do so much better than a courtroom. The creative solutions, and
For
then
sure.
really making sure you're understood and heard, and grabbing, negotiating the places that are important to you that may not be something the court can consider or worry about.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. When I call them, a lot of times I'll call them the micromanaging provisions, right? Where we're gonna go through and decide how we're gonna parent with cell phone use, or we're
yeah,
gonna decide like I feel a lot of times like I become more of a parenting counselor at that point. But I'm a big fan of drafting. It's something that carried over from my days as a practicing attorney. And
yeah,
so I really do pride myself on creative possession schedules that really affect um, a family. I've
yeah,
got families that celebrate Lunar New Year. I've got families that celebrate Muslim or Islamic holidays. I've got all over the board. And so, whereas the family code, most judges are not going to say, okay, let me add in Lunar New Year here, or let me
hmm,
add in this. That is absolutely something I ask every single party that has ties to another country or appear to be very, do you celebrate this? Things
yeah,
that they don't always think about when we're just, hey, here's a standard possession order.
no,
So customizing is probably the single best part of mediation.
agree. Yeah, I want to go through some of these questions are fun. Uh, uh, this is all from Ashley, my social media coordinator. But where did Hell on Heels come from?
So I have a problem with high heels. I will fully, readily admit that. And I mediated a case a little over 10 years ago with who is now the protective order judge in the 280th, Diane Kirby. I
Okay.
was the fourth mediator on the case in almost 4 years, and it was a 13-hour mediation. And of course, she knew I used to post my high heels online. She
Yes.
obviously knew I loved me some shoes. And I will never forget, we're leaving, walking out that night from the mediation, and she goes, Girl, you're hell on heels. And I thought it was super cute.
Yeah.
Started tagging it, and then it just sort of it was a snowball effect because female attorneys throughout the state would start taking pictures of their shoes before they went into court in the morning, kind of like their pump up song, right?
I love
And
it.
they would tag me in it, and then I started using the tagline "Hell on Heels." We ended up creating a 2016. We ended up having a luncheon at Advanced Family Law with about 40 women throughout the state. We formed a Facebook group. We now have over 2,000 attorneys, mediators, judges across the state. We are the anti-mean girl group, and we really believe that there is plenty of success for everyone to go around.
Yeah.
And It's important for women particularly because not all of us had group sports,
Right. Yeah.
as young teens or younger, and that, there's plenty of success and we try to really lift each other up. And there have been a ton of organic mentors and relationships that I've watched over the years develop across the state. You got a really strong Bear County group down there, as a
Yeah.
matter of fact. Yeah, those
Yeah.
ladies are fierce. And we do CLEs down in Mexico. We do an annual luncheon. And I always just say Hell on Heels really isn't about the shoes. It's about the attitude, and it's about helping other people lift themselves, lift up.
That's great.
So it's cute, silly, but it has really been effective.
It's not as cool as Strongest Lawyer in Texas, but it's pretty good.
No, it's not. I get
I'm
it,
just
but
teasing.
hey, my husband's one of you guys, so I get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, big,
Was he?
big, big workout guy. Yeah,
Okay.
sleeved out, tattoos, the whole bit.
I
Like
love it.
we
Yeah.
don't
Okay.
match, but we do.
You sound like my wife a little bit too, because she's all of 5 foot, and nothing. So yeah. Um, uh, am I reading that you did 365 mediations in 1 year?
I did last year.
How?
Um, as you mentioned earlier, there are jurisdictions that require mediation. Most of the jurisdiction I mediate in require mediations.
Yeah.
The courts around Harris, Montgomery County, Fort Bend, if child issues are in question, they will require you to mediate prior to a temporary orders hearing.
Oh, okay.
And so I tend to do more 4 hour blocks of mediation. I tend to do back to backs. I also offer a 6 and 8 hour option, but generally speaking, most of my mediations are going to be 4 hours, which means there are weeks that I do 8 to 10, sometimes more if I work on a weekend.
Yeah.
And I average about, when I'm firing on all cylinders and not dealing with health issues and things, my full calendar is about 30 to 35 mediations a month.
Um, that's a lot.
It is a lot,
Do you
but I'm
drink a
done
lot of
at the end of
caffeine?
the day.
Do you drink a lot of caffeine? That'd be a lot.
I,
Um,
generally speaking, I mean, sometimes it's a little stressful, those morning ones when you feel like you're up against the clock and you really want people the chance to talk. But
yeah.
I've perfected the whole, here's the time we've got. We're going to keep working. If we need to recess and bring you back and start at
Mhm.
whatever point, we'll do that. That's
Yeah.
okay. But I find that most of them that are set for that, my attorneys know whether they need more time than that and they'll book it. But
I
that's
got
how I
you. Fair.
got to that number because there's days I'm doing two a day.
How do you feel about, because I don't know that I've ever mediated temp orders before. It just isn't something that's been prominent and bare. What's your thought on that in general? Do you find it effective? Do you find it coercive? How do
Nope.
you,
I
yeah,
find it very effective because that's when the parties, in my experience, are the most in chaos or in
fair?
crisis,
Yeah.
right? You've got them living in the same house and somebody saying, I'm not leaving my house or I am leaving my house. It really helps sort of game plan and triage and help you get. And I was so used to that when I was a practicing attorney because I was in Harris County in Montgomery County, and we just they just are used to it. So it
Okay.
really helps start game planning, and I find that it can also put you on a short track or a fast track to finalize the divorce. Because if you got two attorneys who are like, look, we may not need full-fledged discovery to spend all this money for these people, but we do need some time to exchange documents, and here's the documents we're going to exchange. Let's see, or maybe we list the house on temporary and put the money in a trust
Fair.
account.
Yeah.
There are lots of things that we can do on temporary orders and quite frankly, there are jurisdictions, especially up in North Texas, where you get 20 minutes aside on a
Yeah.
temporary order. There is no court that can hear what they need to hear, in my opinion, that's going to affect a family for the next 6, 9, 12, 18 months that can do it in 20 minutes aside. I just don't believe that. And so
I'm
I
not sure they
believe.
can in an hour aside, so I agree with you on the 20
Right.
for
I
sure.
mean, I
Yeah.
just think those limits are so restrictive, and I understand that the courts are bogged down. I am not going to disagree with them on that, but that's where I do think that those jurisdictions have found that mediation for temporary orders is actually very effective. And in my experience, we sort of set the docket control order at that point. So we can
Yeah.
address those things and it's going to cost them less time, less money, less stress.
Let's so docket control order, I know what it is, but for people, that's the basically the timeline for the case. Time
Correct.
to say your experts, or time to do summary judgment motions, or time to just do discovery, or just a freaking trial date, right? I mean, whatever. I mean, it could be that. I do like the idea of, because if I'm, you're representing the party, the temp orders, you may not like the result, or you may not like what the temp orders are,
Right.
but you can negotiate maybe some timeline things down the line. So maybe you've got, just to make an easy example, the dad who doesn't really want to pay support or thinks he should be primary, some issues, but it's not really practical at that moment. Well, why am I paying this? Whatever. But maybe it can be like, we're only doing this for 3 months because trial's in 3 months, and you got your custody evaluation or whatever it is. I can see a lot of leeway that way. So what you're losing, I hate to say losing, winners are losing, but what you're giving up as far as maybe some control right now, you're taking
Correct.
control of your case going forward. I can see a lot of that
Well,
helping a lot. Yeah.
I've had a slew of teenagers not wanting to see one parent or the other recently.
Yeah.
And
Ugh.
so I had one this week that we just said, you know what? We're going to get, there's a couple of really good reunification therapists I've encountered in a couple of jurisdictions I work in. And I said, why don't we just not do a full day today? Why don't we get this person on board? Let's see, and then let's talk in three
Yeah.
months or 4 months or whatever. Let's see if some of the drama doesn't sort of pan itself out, because otherwise we've got all these contingencies that are going to be really difficult to plan for. So I gave them 4 hours back. I said, I'll see you in, 3 to 6 months. Let's see how it goes. And so that kind of problem solving, that kind of providing resources for parties is something that not all judges are going to do. Sometimes it's we need
Okay.
an amicus attorney. Sometimes it's, hey, we really need to get this kid evaluated because the parties are so opposite on what they believe. Does he have ADD going on? Is there a learning disability? Let's find out what those needs are, and then we can come back and we can structure something that addresses those needs.
I agree. I think my experience in Bear is the judges want to do what you're talking about,
Yeah.
but then you have the rules that they are kind of constrained by, and then you've got kind of us in the middle, the attorneys that, I mean, let's just be real, are going to take advantage of which approach is going to help our client more, because that's kind of what I'm
Absolutely, you
paid to
are.
do. And if
Right.
it's more of the holistic, planning approach, I'm going to approach the judge with that. If it's, I need to cog the wheel because this isn't going to look too good for my guy, I need to do that. But I do like the idea of pause, go mediate, especially if you have available mediators that could take these 4 hour mediations. I don't know. I need to think about that. I didn't come in today thinking I was going to change how I do temp orders, but maybe I'll
I
consider.
I will, my West Texas attorneys think it's crazy, but there have been more than one occasion where we've been set for a final mediation, and it's just very obvious that we need to press the pause button. And
Yeah.
they've been very, very open to doing that, especially if I say, and we're going to come back by this date. And a lot of times we will actually schedule a date.
Yeah.
So you go for temporary, look, we're going to go exchange documents by this date, we're going to do an inventory, and we're coming back and we'll put it in the MSA. We're coming back June 15th at 9 a.m. And
Mhm.
parties like that, because they know what to expect. Because as you know, it is very common trying to coordinate busy attorneys and their schedule, a
Yeah.
mediator, two parties. You and I both know how common it is for things to reschedule, get bumped. It's a lot.
Yeah.
And so the parties get frustrated because they don't always understand that process. So having a date and time certain makes a big difference because there's something, my West Texas attorneys book 2 to 3 months out.
Yeah. Imagine. I want to go through some of these because these are kind of fun questions. What are some of the biggest misconceptions clients have before their first mediations in your
That I am
experience?
the judge. That it is
Fair.
a formal process. Like they're going to show up in a suit and tie in their living room, and they think that I am going to make decisions. Secondly, they think that we're all going to sit together in a room,
Yes.
whether it's a virtual room or otherwise. And I explain that is not the case, which makes them take a big breath. And probably third, I get not a ton, but sometimes they seem very surprised that we're going to sign something right there on the spot.
Really?
That I
Yeah.
get that on occasion, and I'm like, that's how this works. Like, this is rarely something that we all go sleep on
No.
because
Yeah.
generally, when we do that, people
Oh no.
forget why we've agreed to what we've agreed to and they go backwards.
Yeah. No, that's fair. Do people need to be on good terms to mediate successfully?
Absolutely not. Some of the best mediations I've had is when somebody comes in. I love it when they say, well, this case will never settle. And I'm like, hold my beer. That's the best challenge an attorney can
I
give me
love
is
it.
tell me something's not going to settle.
I love it. Um, this question is going to go a long way, but how much control do parties really have over the outcome of mediation? And I want you to contrast that with court, because that's one of the major
I
reasons
have
I put both. Yeah,
always believed that mediation puts the parties in the driver's seat, both of them, not just
yeah,
one, both of them in the driver's seat to find where they are on the same page and where they are not. And unfortunately, sometimes it's a Sophie's choice, right? Because
yep,
I always talk about doing a cost benefit analysis that is not, it's financial, it's emotional, it's legal. And that legal part, sometimes I have to tell people, like, this is what you're looking at in court, and this is where this person is or is not going to move. A perfect example of that is a party who comes in who wants 50-50 and doesn't want to pay child support even if there's a huge income discrepancy between the parties. They don't understand that offsets are not in our family code. They do not
hmm
understand that, you know, the standard possession order, if you live within 50 miles, is only about 3 weeks difference. It's certainly
hmm
not enough to swing that child support number. And so I have to really tell them we work in an imperfect system. I'm not going to sit there and tell somebody that our family law system is perfect. It is not. But when you subject yourself to it, sometimes we have to make hard decisions.
yeah,
And so, people say, I don't have a choice. You always have a choice, but I fully acknowledge that your choice isn't a great one sometimes.
that's fair. How do you handle you specifically when you have kind of two questions: parties who don't want to compromise that are very stuck dug in, but then the second question is attorneys who aren't really trying to
Woo,
help the
that's the word.
process.
That's the problem right there.
Yeah,
You'll see an attorney impede a mediation process way before you will see a party do that, in my experience. And I don't blame them. They're doing their job, but at the end of the day, the best attorneys are the ones that say, "This is my advice. Here's why." And I've told people sometimes they'll tell me something and I'll say, "Here's what your attorney's about to tell me." I mean, I know. Work
yeah,
with a lot of the same attorneys and we have good working relationships, so I kind of know who's going to say what. A party who digs in, especially if it's on something really odd, like why is that your hill to die on?
yeah,
I spend a little time trying to figure out what's really going on underneath because it's rarely about the actual issue that we're fighting about.
yeah.
It's usually something else or some other reason. And generally, not all the time, but generally, a party that's doing that is going to be the party that, despite maybe being the petitioner or despite saying, I want a divorce, doesn't want the divorce.
Uh, I
That's
didn't
my
think of that.
experience. Right.
Yeah.
Right. You
Uh,
can tell who is it who emotionally has been done a while and who was shocked when they got served and was like, I thought everything was great.
yeah,
And I've got the other party saying it's been miserable because we haven't slept together for 8 years.
right.
Like,
I thought you were fine in your own
I
room
thought
over
we
there.
were
Just chill.
fine, right? So, and honestly, Bo, that's just a lot of what you get from experience doing this.
Yeah. How do
You
you,
can't
so how
learn
do
that in a
you,
book. You can't learn it in a CLE training. You can't learn it in a mediation training. You learn it by interacting with people
do you ever take attorneys aside or kind of pull them or text them like, hey, could you shut the F up? I mean, how do you
all the
handle it?
time.
Yeah.
All the time. I'll be like, can we do an
Yeah.
attorney conference? And I'm not going to point the other attorney. I'm going to be like,
Can you help
um,
me out? Yeah.
one thing I will do that a lot with is I will do it with younger attorneys
Okay.
who are maybe less experienced, good attorneys, right?
Yeah.
But I am never going to make anybody look foolish in front of their client. I'm never going to, make anybody feel like they aren't in control of their room.
this is, I think, go back to our earlier part of the conversation, though, the distinction of, I think, family law specifically, and maybe there's some probate matters, the guardianships that would fall in this category, but that the humanity of this, and I know this is like ringing over and over. When you serve in your client's interest, it's not just the boxes I can check for conservatorship, rights and duties, access with the kids, money, insurance, injunctions. It's their well-being going forward. Now, it's awkward on the attorney side because at the end of the day, I work for you. You want this, I'm going to give you my advice, and this is the game plan you want.
Right.
Strategically, I'll decide how, but I'm going to do what you ask me. But in a mediation room, I think it takes some time, especially now that I've been divorced and gone through some stuff in the courtroom myself. It's like you've got to think of the long-term impact of what you're doing. Is it worth this day? Just because, I can get this and this in court, is it really worth the collateral damage to your soon to be ex-spouse, to the kids in the process? All of that stuff matters. And I think a lot of times either attorneys with not much experience or just maybe very obtuse or callous too. I've got my checklist and this is just how I do
Right.
things.
I have to compartmentalize. I can't
Yeah,
deal with
there you
emotion
go.
at all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Miss like you're not helping your own client. And again, I don't think it's malicious most of the sometimes it is. I think there are some
I think we're
colleagues that are, but
programmed. I think, law school is a attracts very interesting personalities. I think we can all agree to that. And it certainly doesn't train us necessarily to bring that empathy to the table with
yeah,
us. And,
yeah,
I think that parties appreciate both having that human part and having the legal part, and at least they get to decide. But one thing I tell them, and the attorneys who are on board with me who recognize this, I mean, I'm old. I got a 27-year-old. I've been down that road.
yeah,
But what they don't understand is there's not some magic bell that ends it all when these kids turn 18 or graduate from high school. There
yeah.
are graduations, there are weddings, there are babies, there are showers, there are funerals. You are going to be connected to this person for as long as you or your children are alive.
I tell you the part that I never understood till I got divorced. I've got a 19-year-old, 16-year-old, 14-year-old, and 6-year-old with my ex-wife.
Yep.
The 19-year-old graduated at age 17. She turned 18 that August, and we got divorced. The mediation was February of her senior year,
Mhm.
so she was only part of the case for a couple months
Right.
after.
Brief time.
And
Yeah.
I'm going to be careful with because there's active litigation. But what I didn't appreciate was the the role that the older kids will play in your life after, um, and the effect of the divorce on the relationship between the parent and the kids.
Absolutely.
So all those things you just said, but even at a much more basic level, your conduct during the divorce and right after and how you treat the other party will affect whether you even have a relationship with these kids down the line. And
And yep.
and I think somewhat common, again, in a more traditional relationship,
Right.
the moms that are, and I honestly think it's less malicious than people think, but are in a very controlling way. They kind of want to, your dad left me, your dad cheated on me, he did this, he's this. I think the kids in the back end are going to linger towards that other parent, and the moms are left wondering what happened. And that's what happened is they saw the conflict. So, and that's one example of, but I didn't appreciate that till I experienced it. And that's just the kind of thing like, again, winning this court case, what are we really winning?
Right.
So let's craft it in a way
Well,
that the kids are doing okay and you're just surviving, I guess. But
and I tell my moms all the time, and this is something that I experienced myself, especially if you're a type A mama bear, right?
mhm,
You think you are all knowing, that you know everything there is to know about your child. What I had to learn the hard way is I had no clue what it was like to be a 10-year-old boy, a 13-year-old boy, a 16-year-old boy. I had no idea. And so there was definitely times there where I should have listened to his dad's wisdom when I just discounted that. And so I tell my moms all the time, like, we're raising men, not boys. There are babies and we get them and we are there to nurture them. But at the end of the day, maybe dad doesn't have some bad ideas. And
Yeah.
so that's something that's very, and I try to relate to them on that, right? Like be like might hear, and I mean, I think it's common knowledge, but my son is with a tactical unit with the United States Coast Guard. He's like Rambo. Okay, that's I mean, I'm sorry, I
That's
joke.
really
That's
cool.
that's
Yeah.
what he does. Yeah, he is a sniper for the Coast Guard, the tactical unit out of Miami. And if you'd have told somebody 10 years ago that the US government was going to trust that child with a gun, nobody would have ever believed you, right? He was
Not just
alive.
any gun, some real big
Right,
things.
the real thing, like I'm jumping out of helicopters onto oil tankers kind of stuff. Here
Yeah.
you so, I'm obviously very proud of him, but I also found a village to help me.
Yeah.
And I had to learn to let him have his own relationship with his dad and to at least consider those things where, putting my own thoughts and feelings aside. And it's not easy. But if I can help those moms, because it means they're going to come back to court less, right?
Yep.
If they can do that, because at the end of the day, there's back to that financial, emotional, and legal cost.
Yeah.
And if I can set them up in such a way and at least plant a seed with them, then I think it's a win-win.
I know this is from like I believe in it, like a traditional model, but I saw a meme the other day and I'm dealing with this with my current spouse because she has a 6-year-old boy and his dad
Yeah.
passed away. So it's a dynamic with
A lot,
us
very
learning.
different dynamic,
Yeah.
right?
And the social media meme was basically like, the hardest thing for moms to do is watch dads get on to younger boys because the mom's brain is saying he needs to be
That's how
cared
they,
for, he's upset, he needs this. And all those things are true. And of course, we're looking at like this guy's going to be a man in X years. He needs to learn how to do ABC, he needs direction, he needs discipline. And so that's hard enough in my loving marriage now. And then doing that with an ex-spouse with all the
right.
resentment and frustration and trauma and stuff behind, learning how to co-parent together and have similar goals, it's a lot and usually not possible. So you're just you're kind of band-aiding, I think, things together
Sure.
in these orders, unfortunately. But yeah, um it's hard. I know it's just been hard in my personal life, and it's hard to watch families fight over a day here, a day here, and you're just kind of looking like these kids just want to see you both. They want to
Yep,
play the
they love you
sports.
both. They want to
Yeah.
see you, and they should want to see you. And if they don't, then there's a problem, and we need to
Yes.
address it.
Yeah, I agree. I want to shift gears a little bit. And if it's okay, I asked you before we started, but um, give you a chance to kind of share your story a little bit. So, you've been an attorney for a minute, been a mediator a long time, but you're diagnosed with, I don't even fully know what kind of cancer in 2020, I think you said. Do you
Was
mind sharing kind of the story and where you're at?
I do not. I always say that I wouldn't be as good at mediation if I hadn't had as many mistakes or bad things happen in my life. I've struggled in the past with mental health issues, with severe clinical depression. Best thing I ever did for that was get myself in an intensive outpatient program for 8 weeks. Got a lot of tools that I still use to this day, and that was back in 2014. Fast forward, post COVID, I was diagnosed in April of 2021 with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a form of blood cancer,
Yeah.
and went through chemotherapy then, lost my hair, started from scratch, and then I relapsed in the summer of 24. And that was a little bit of a different project. They had to give me what they call salvage chemo, and then I ended up going through a bone marrow transplant. So think of it as basically you get a brand new immune system, is the way I describe it to people. So I spent 30 days in the hospital, 100 days in isolation after numerous rounds of chemotherapy to get rid of the cancer so they could take my own cells out. It was a whole process, emotionally challenging, physically challenging. All I really wanted to do was just work and run my business.
Yeah.
And so it was very humbling. It was also very enlightening. You learn a lot about people when you go through something like that. You learn what people either can't or won't be there. And then you learn what people absolutely will, even if you had no existing relationship with them before.
Yeah.
And that's been very valuable to me, and I think makes me a little more empathetic, even as a mediator, as a person and a mediator.
Um, how long were you out of commission after your first diagnosis? Like, did you have to take off from work or anything like that?
Kind of.
Okay,
I'm a little stubborn.
fair.
I actually, my poor doctor, he must think, who is this crazy type A lady? Because first of all, I had made a decision that I was going to dress every day for chemotherapy. So I had 6 rounds of chemotherapy, 1 full day every 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And so I literally had an outfit or a theme for every single day. I would wear my high heels or I had chemo instead of Cancun was one theme. I had life as a bowl of cherries, and I had an old school, like 1950s, dress with cherries on it. I tried to make it a positive thing no matter how terrible I felt. So I would take off on Fridays for treatment. I would then be off Friday, Monday, Tuesday, and I would go back and work in between
Okay.
treatments. By that point, we were post-COVID, so I was able to do so virtually.
I got you. Yeah.
But there were days, admittedly, I'm stubborn. There were days that I would I have one of those rolling hospital tables I bought, and I would do a fake Zoom background, and I would fire up and mediate in between rounds of chemotherapy. Got
For
harder at
those
the end, but I did all right.
for those to give the context, when COVID was at 2019, I think into 2020,
In the
and
mid spring of 2020.
thank you. Yeah, that the courts, shut down for a month-ish, depending on the jurisdiction and all that,
Right.
and then reopening most, if not all, a lot of virtual platforms, usually Zoom, and then that has been integrated into kind of how we do courts now, depending again the jurisdiction. But the
Right.
mediations, which were almost exclusively in person, went to almost exclusively online, and now I don't know what the percentage would be, but I haven't done an in-person mediation in a long time. So
My last in-person mediation was, I think I was looking, was November 6th of 23. It was election day. And
wow,
that's how
okay,
I remembered it. I traveled to Conroe and did a mediation with 2 attorneys there. And I remember one of the attorneys saying to me, see, now you see why this should be in person. And I was thinking,
not really.
actually, no. Because the two wives ran into each other in the lobby, and there was a lot of tension and a lot of it was in my experience, I thought it was a way more laid back situation to be able to do it virtually. But I'll show
I'm
up
sh-
and do it.
I'm sure there are cases. I don't know if any family cases, but maybe there's some like major class action cases with major parties, and you have five people on each side that have to
Sure.
sign off decisions, and maybe that big conference room. I'm sure there are cases where that does make a lot of sense, where we just all got to look at each other and
Right.
get I can see that. But in family cases, I think digital is just for a myriad of reasons.
Yeah. I think
Where are you
right
at?
now I'm more comfortable.
Where are you at now, health wise? You said you had the
Health-wise,
relapse.
I'm good. I'm in remission. I still have a port. I still get monthly immunotherapy
Mhm.
infusions, which, the way I see it, if I have to do that the rest of my life and take off a day every 4 weeks to do it, it's well worth being able to
Yeah.
live life and do life. So I mean, I'm coming up on 15 months in remission this go round. I get scanned every 12 weeks. I've learned the art of going in and out of the medical world to really compartmentalize it and not make it my whole identity. And I'm grateful for every day. The fact that, I'm finally getting hair again, the fact that I can pop over and move my body. Quite frankly, I'm grateful that I can eat healthy. There's not a lot I have control over, but I do have control over those things. And so I'm grateful.
I can't. I mean, one day I'll share that experience, but um, I can't. The first experience of my life I had that would even be like that kind of eye-opening, life-changing was a kid. In back-to-back years, I was able to do in churches we call them mission trips, but they send us to third world countries,
Right.
and so there was a very real eye-opening. Like you can say it all you want, you can read it all you want, you can read National Geographic or watch TV, but until you actually, I went to Dominican Republic, and like, oh no, those kids grow up in a hut in sugarcane fields, and then if they play baseball with me, they'll remember it the rest of their life. Or,
Right.
this book I gave them. And so that was the first time I had an experience like that. And then as an adult, whether it's loss or I've had drug addiction issues in the past, and then divorce will be there. But um, I mean, I'm trying to think of non-cliche questions to ask about
Well,
it,
no,
but
I mean,
yeah,
I tell people that cancer was one of the best things to ever happen to me,
yeah,
which sounds really bad when I know that there are people who were not as fortunate as I was to get through it, and but it definitely changed my perspective. It made me appreciate the day-to-day routines. It
yeah,
made me appreciate the fact that I can get up and sometimes deal with people who are a little crazy at times,
yeah.
like I get to do that. I don't have to do that. I get that opportunity. I knock on wood. I am going to have the opportunity to be healthy and strong enough to play with my grandbabies that I'm ready. In case my son's watching this, I'm ready. Grandbaby time. While I'm still young enough and healthy
Yeah.
enough to enjoy that. So
What would you tell, and I mean, I was going to say women, but I think anybody, but who, especially, I think you were single at the time, right?
I was single at the time. My now husband and I've dated off and on for about 8 years. So he
Hmm.
was around. But
Sure.
as far as coming home at night alone, we didn't live together. I
Yeah.
was single at the time. The
Well,
Coast Guard was very gracious to let my son come home for about a month. And I
okay.
had my daughter-in-law here for a brief time, but it's scary to think about the practical effects of that when you're a business owner and you're going through something like that.
I was going to ask, what would you tell people and to give them encouragement situation? The podcast that posted last week. I don't know if you had a chance to listen, but it's an MMA fighter, a very young woman, I think it's all of 28,
Right,
and an elite athlete, just crazy. Like I'm strong, but she's just elite all over. And
right,
she has a knee injury that she's rehabbing, and she was almost brought to tears. And I'm not in any way picking on her, brought to tears that how her day to day life changed because of just struggling to get in the shower, get dressed with a knee
right.
injury. So I'm trying to give the opportunity. Like, what would you tell people in your situation? Like, this is scary, but to give them encouragement, what resources to
Right.
look for, that kind of thing.
The only way to go through it is to go straight through it, right? The only way to get to the end is to go through it. You don't really have a choice. I was very much in denial with my first, diagnosis initially. I went through that process. I have I call her my cancer therapist. I found a great therapist who actually has been through 3 bouts of thyroid cancer herself, and that's what
Yeah,
made her decide to go get her degree and do this. I also, strangely enough, some of my dearest friends and most staunch supporters through both times were folks who were in online groups, Facebook groups, support groups, who were going through the same diagnosis. One
okay,
of my I connected with a dear friend who was going through his transplant at the same time I was. He lived up in Virginia. Turns out his daughter and son-in-law are stationed at the same unit my son's going to in July. So you find people that you wouldn't ordinarily have the opportunity to connect with. And so those were the emotional things that helped me a lot. And quite frankly, part of it was just deciding this sucks. I have zero control over this happening to me, but what I do have control of is how I approach it.
yeah,
So, I mean, I decorated my room at the hospital for a month. Like the doctors and nurses would all come to check it out because I was a little over the top. But it's what I needed.
yeah.
If I'm going to have to be here in one room stuck like the girl in the bubble for a month, then this is what I'm going to do with it. And so I did what worked for me.
Did you have? I don't want to be too negative, but I know my wife, her husband passed in the summer of 23. That passed that we met after, obviously. And after me and her met and started to get serious, it wasn't received very well, and by some people. And unfortunately, there's a subset of friends and people in her life that just aren't there anymore. That for whatever reason, whether they were
Right.
dealing with their own grief in their own way or whatever their deal was. Did you have people that unfortunately like didn't step up that you would expect or dead
I
weight to
had
cut out?
I had people that absolutely disappeared.
Yeah,
It is not uncommon from what I learned. in my groups. I was shocked, people who I was very close with before. But, after having some time, because I mourned a couple of those relationships, but I also realized that sometimes people are in our lives for a season
Yeah,
and for a reason. And it doesn't mean that you can't appreciate what that was, but it means that perhaps it just doesn't fit who you are in this chapter of your life. Because I promise you, none of us are the same as we were 20 years ago or
of
30 years
course.
ago, right? We all evolve.
Yeah.
And so once I was able to, as my dear friend Michelle O'Neill says, shift the kaleidoscope a little bit and stop the grieving process and embrace the people who stepped in and stepped up, that was awe-inspiring. And
Yeah.
so I focused on that instead. And no ill will. I just have decided this is this chapter, and I'm not going to spend my time in the last one.
Okay. Well, I know you have someplace to be, but I have one more topic I would like if you
Sure.
want to take the time here. Um, I've had an LPC on before, and then they're a champion of mental health, and you were open earlier about struggling with clinical depression. Um, I don't even know how to frame any questions, but I mean, I'm in therapy weekly. I have diagnosis that I'm medicated for myself. I mean, what I think first would you be give some encouragement to people? I mean, both of us are professionals. We've got degrees behind us. We got cool crap on our wall. There's a lot to celebrate, in our worlds, but that doesn't mean you can't struggle with mental health. I mean, give you the floor for that at first,
Right. I will tell you this, even though I'm in a really good place and have been for quite a while, there are still days where I resort back to some of the skills I learned, even in that intensive outpatient program.
Yeah,
I always tell people, because we've been talking a lot about mediation, and how many times have you and I heard this person is narcissistic, this person is bipolar?
yeah,
If we had a dollar for every time we'd hear that, we probably wouldn't need to work, right? We
nope,
hear it all the time.
yeah,
But at the end of the day, what I tell people is this: it is not having the mental health issue, because that's a chemical imbalance. That's what it is.
hmm
It's a chemical imbalance. It's no different than having cancer. It's no different than having diabetes. It just happens to, the symptoms are different.
hmm
It is not having that chemical imbalance that is the problem. It is being in denial of or not getting help with that chemical imbalance that creates problems for you, not just in family court, but in life,
yeah,
right? Relationships, employment. It carries over. So there is no shame. And I think we've come a long way with that. I really do. I don't think that even 10, 20 years ago, the stigma that was there, I think is very different now.
I
And so
agree.
I would encourage people, like, go get the help. You
Yeah.
don't have to advertise it, but own it, right?
Yeah, you said your husband works out. Obviously, I,
Mhm.
it's a priority for me. I do the strongman stuff, and it's amazing to me, like, because the way I think of the mental health, the therapy is like, I walk or run, I go to the sauna, I lift
Right.
heavy. Obviously, I do a lot of things to worry about my health, peptides and
Right.
vitamins and supplements. Why
Ditto.
wouldn't you worry about your mental health in the same way, even proactively? So again, I'm in a weekly therapy, sometimes biweekly, but that doesn't mean there's an acute issue at the day of, but I know I have tendencies, I have diagnoses, so why
Sure.
wouldn't I do that consistently to be in therapy going forward? The
It-
same way I walk and work out. So that's how I think of it. I don't know if that's the
Right.
right approach,
Well, and
but
it's no
yeah.
different. I always tell people, because the number one excuse I get with that is, I don't have time. I've got these kids, I've got this, I've got that. And what I say to people is this: the very first thing they tell you when you get on an airplane is put that oxygen mask on yourself, not
hmm
on the two little ones sitting next to you, on
Yeah,
you. And if you don't do that, you are not going to be able to be the partner, the parent, the employer, the employee that you want to be for the people in your lives. So I'm a big
yeah.
advocate of that. Like, put your big girl panties on and let's work the problem.
I struggle with anyone with I don't have time, and I could get, I could do the very defensive of like you should see my schedule, but what I prefer to do is tell people, look, we all have the same 168 hours in a week.
Right.
And I say we all. I mean, I'm talking about people around my age with jobs, with
Correct.
kids and spouses.
Kids, all
We
the
all we
things.
all have these things we worry about. It's a matter of priority. And the reality is, like you were saying, it's a matter of priority. You were saying earlier, the example in the airplane, you have to be healthy to even be the best version of yourself for other
Right.
people. Um, the best athletes in the world, there's sacrifice that goes with that to become great at anything. The best business owners or the biggest business owners, there simply are sacrifices and choices to be made. But I think be careful I say this, but I passionately believe there's an innate selfishness to not taking care of yourself and saying, I'm taking care of my kids or others and not looking inward because people love you too. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
if you're refusing, we've got a buddy of mine who is, and this isn't to like fat shame, very overweight, and he's a part of our gym. So that's why we care. And like he
Right.
has every resource available to him. Our chiropractor who does like peptides and hormone therapies, working out, we're two of my buddies are pro athletes. I'm semi-pro here, buddy, like whatever you need, we got you. You're gonna die before you're 50. We love you. Take care of yourself. And whether
Right.
that's mental health, whether that's or someone going through get a diagnosis and don't want to go through the treatments because of I think there is a different type of selfishness that you don't even care for yourself because people do love you around. And I want to
Correct.
be careful with that because I don't want to be too arrogant with that. But it's not you're not a martyr in my mind or a I don't look at you on a high pedestal for not caring for yourself because you're taking your kids to everything under the sun. You're not sleeping. You're living on caffeine and chicken nuggets. Like
Right.
no,
That does
like
you no good. You can't. So
yeah,
for me, and I think it looks different for different people. Like what
yeah,
is it, and for me, I've been, since day one, I've been seeing a PhD nutritionist researcher guy who treats athletes and cancer patients. Those are his
yeah.
specialties. And I do my once a year blood work with him, and it's just a special micronutrient. I pretty much just eat organic because I know that my body is now, after all of the chemicals and the chemotherapy, I am now susceptible to other cancers. So I
I
am
believe,
not
yeah,
doing anything to contribute to that. Whether it's I go twice a year for a skin check. I love the sun. I'm a beach girl. I have not been in the sun in 5 years, right? Because
yeah,
they tell me I'm more susceptible to that. I don't have control over much, but I do have control over those things. And quite
yeah.
frankly, I lost my dad my third year of law school. I was 24 years old. He was
Wow,
53, and age
goodness,
I will be in March, died of a heart attack. And I would never do that. Even though my son is an adult, I would never want to do that to him. So I
mhm.
do all the things. So, like I said, I can be a wife, I can be a mom, one day a grandmother who's active and enjoying those kids. And that's really, yes, it's selfish, but it's really not. It's
No, and
it's so you
yeah,
aren't and quite frankly, I don't want to be in my 70s or 80s and be a burden on my kids. So I do
yeah.
Pilates and like I do those things to get my body where it needs to be.
Yeah, and again, I'm not trying to be insensitive to people because I do know it's
Okay.
hard to take those first steps, whether it's in physical or mental health. But as an encouragement, like in 2022, I was 350 pounds, like 50% body fat. I know what that feels like.
Sure.
I've had drug addiction where I've had to go intensive outpatient. I've, been in very nasty places, dark places after my divorce. I do get it. But grieve it. But if you don't deal like that, you said it with the um with the mental health, there's no shame in the chemical imbalance, but the consequences come when you don't do what you can do
Don't do it.
to work on it. And that's the same with drug addiction for us. It's you're a drug addict, there's no shame in that you have a
Right.
chemical predilection for it, a genetic predilection. But if you don't, if you're need to be going to meetings or you need to be doing this or avoiding these behaviors or people, places, or things, that's the conduct that you need to be held accountable for because you know who you are and what you're
Correct.
capable of. So, but also again to the proactive side of mental health, don't just crutch on it. I'm this, I can't do this. Yeah, you can. There's
You
treatments,
can.
there's support groups and all that. And
There's
again, you
even
could,
online therapies now. Like,
yes,
it's changed so much. And, whatever it is for you, like you said, get those resources. I too know what it's like. I lost 85 pounds in
mm,
2019. And for the first time in my adult life, I've kept it off within 10
yeah,
pounds or so. But it's because I changed those habits and patterns and decided that this is what I'm going to do. And so whether that's mental health checkups, whether that is the physical stuff, it's accomplishable. You just got to take it one baby step at a time.
Yeah. Well, where can people find you if we want to book mediations?
Book mediations, I am at hellonheelsmediation.com.
Okay.
And that is where the attorneys can find me. I even mediate for pro se parties sometimes.
Hmm.
That seems to be one of my skills is, helping people feel a little more comfortable in the situation.
I
But
know
I
the
love
answer. I
what I
think.
do and I love working with people.
Do you litigate at all? Or are you
No,
exclusively mediating? Oh,
I no longer have a license. I no longer litigate. I have not done that since 2017. I
okay.
am
There you
I
go.
am exclusively full-time mediator.
Okay. Do you have any socials or websites you want to plug or anything you want to share with everybody?
Traci.ahart on Instagram is where I'm
Okay.
at. But other than that, I'm just me. I try to be myself.
There you go. Well, I appreciate you coming on. Is there anything else you want to share? Anything you think we missed on mediations or anything
No,
you
I
want
think
to
we're
share with
good, but
everybody?
I appreciate it. This has actually been fun.
It has been fun.
Of course,
Yeah.
you and I get along anyway, so that helps,
That
right?
makes it easy. And
Yeah,
I love the forum. I love the long form. It's just an opportunity for people to hear long, full, detailed explanations. Especially in a top, I mean, the several topics we covered, but mediation in particular, I think that's why you wanted to come on,
right,
is dispel some myths and prepare because I find myself sometimes maybe shorter with clients than I should be, and like, why are you nervous? It's just mediation,
right,
and maybe I don't give they've never done it, man. Chill, they don't know how informal it can
right.
be, but to get another face to it. You've done this for a very long time and done apparently thousands. I don't know if you've ever counted.
Yeah,
Uh,
thousands at this point. I mean,
yeah,
it's 9 years full time and part time before then, so it's a
yeah.
lot.
So, I want people to get that opportunity, but also, I love meeting people or hearing from people, their
Right.
stories. I had a judge on recently, Mary Lou Alvarez, who
Oh, I
has a
love her.
pretty,
Oh, I know her. I mean, you
yeah.
remember in San Antonio, she's an institution.
Yeah. Well, she's got a rough reputation with some of my colleagues and some of there for demeanor and other things. So, like, well, let me hear from her in full. And
Right.
sure enough, to no surprise, I learned so much more about her, who she is, where she comes from, her thinking process, and just it's so much more enriching to hear again long form than like a canned campaign speech or a 2 minute
Correct.
ad or an Instagram reel.
Right.
So I really appreciate you giving people that opportunity to hear more and hear the human being behind it. Like we're all full
Right.
humans too. And just because I'm mediating doesn't mean maybe I'm recently married or maybe I'm going through a
Right.
cancer treatment
We all
and
live our
people know.
lives.
Yeah.
Right.
So I appreciate it. Well, thanks to everybody for listening. Stay tuned. We'll put all of Tracy's socials and links there to my colleagues. I have used her before. She's a wonderful mediator. And it's a lot of fun to be with her. And stay tuned next week. Stay strong, everybody. Go Tigers.